dinner time at Macbeth's castle, and there is Macbeth himself plotting murder. His servants are running across the stage with plates of food, and he's there quietly talking to himself in his first soliloquy, thinking about whether or not he should kill his king. This is Act 1, Scene 7 of Macbeth, and this is Macbeth's first soliloquy. Later in the scene, his wife will come in, and when he's doubting, she will convince him to commit the crime, so that by the end of the scene and by the end of the act, he's ready to go. He's ready to do it, even though he had been full of doubts. In this video, we're going to look at the first part of Act 1, Scene 7, Macbeth's soliloquy. We're going to look at Lady Macbeth's entrance and her conversation with her husband in which she persuades him to commit the crime in a subsequent video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and like this video, and then you'll find out next time I post a video on Macbeth. So this scene takes place almost in public. There's people running across the stage with food, and the fact that Macbeth is there and plotting almost in front of his servants and out loud to himself suggests the very thin line between his secretive goals of killing his king and the very public scene that he's in. In fact, this is a play that is full of the contrast between the public and the private, and here the two are very, very close together. If you watch some of the performances, such as Fassbender's Macbeth, you can see that he hardly bothers to disguise the fact that he's going to kill Duncan. He uses the threat of his tyrannical power much more than the secretive cloak and dagger, should I do it or should I not? But if we look at Shakespeare's original text here, which we're going to study now, it does seem that he's full of doubts and not like a tyrant at all that he will become later on in the play. And that's why this scene and this soliloquy are so important in setting Macbeth up as the tragic hero. So he plunges into his first soliloquy, and it's all about whether or not he should commit the crime. And obviously, to a Jacobean audience, regicide, the killing of your king, is the worst kind of murder you can possibly commit. You'd get hung for it. And so they would be there screaming, "No, you should not kill your king. This is morally completely wrong." And to a modern audience, it seems pretty obvious that it's wrong as well. We're not in favour of murder in any way, are we? So, but there he is, considering it and thinking about it. And he actually goes through a whole list of reasons why he should or should not kill his king. And if you were to imagine a ledger with all the reasons why he shouldn't commit the crime over here and the reasons why he should commit the crime over here, you'd actually see that there's an enormous long list of reasons why he shouldn't commit the crime and only one very flaky reason about why he should. So over on this side, why should he not commit the crime? Well, he might get caught and punished for it. The king is his family. He's a subject of the king. The king is the guest in his castle. And also, the king's such a good guy that God will tell everybody that he's committed the crime and that he'll get found out that way. A whole load of reasons why not to do it. What's the one reason why he should do it? Because of his ambition. That's not a very balanced list, is it? And in fact, he seems to realise this. He seems to be talking himself out of committing the crime. But then Lady Macbeth comes in and he gets persuaded. Let's go through and look in a bit of detail at the reasons he gives, first of all, for not committing the crime. The really obvious one that jumps out straight away as something that's occupying his mind is this idea of getting caught. He starts off with a couple of conditional clauses where he says, well, if I could get away with it, if there weren't going to be any consequences, I'd just do it. But, he says, there is judgment here. And then he says,
"We but teach bloody instructions, which, being taught, return to plague the inventor. This even-handed justice commends the ingredients of our poison chalice to our own lips."
What he's talking about there is something that would easily be recognised by Jacobean audiences. He's talking about revenge. He calls it their even-handed justice. You know, I do something to somebody and they come back and they get their revenge. They do the same thing back to me. This would clearly be recognised by Jacobeans because one of of the big dramatic genres of those times was the revenge drama. And in fact, later in the play, Macbeth turns into a revenge drama with Macduff as the avenger, coming back to get his revenge on Macbeth for killing his family. So Macbeth is fearful for something that actually transpires to be true. This is a kind of foreshadowing here. And the Jacobean audience would know that revenge is a very complex theme. It had already been explored in Hamlet, for example, and it had been shown to be a very complex thing. You know, killing someone and then that person getting their revenge on you was there in all the drama of the day. So it's a topical theme, it's a genre theme that people would have been fascinated by. But in fact, the thing that seems to bother him much more than that is this idea not of getting caught by humans and of them getting their revenge on him, but an idea of God finding out. This kind of spiritual judgment is what really seems to preoccupy him. It's quite interesting that he does use the word judgment at the start of the speech. In fact, he talks about, if I could get away with it, I would skip the life to come. And skipping the life to come could mean I wouldn't worry about the future on this planet, but it could also, and equally and perhaps more so, mean I wouldn't worry about the afterlife, the life to come, the judgment that I'm going to face after my death. And to cement the idea that he's actually thinking about the afterlife, he then says, but there is judgment here, which means I'm not that worried about judgment from God, but I am worried about getting judged here, as in here on this planet in this life. So he kind of gives the game away that he is thinking a bit about God, and he leaves that while he thinks about people getting their revenge on him. But he comes back to it when he says,
"This Duncan hath borne his faculty so meek, hath been so clear in his great office, that his virtues will plead like angels, trumpet-tongued, against the deep damnation of his taking off, and pity like a naked newborn babe, striding the blast, or heaven's cherubim, horsed upon the sightless couriers of the air, shall blow the horrid deed in every eye, that tears shall drown the wind."
What's he saying there? He's saying Duncan's such a good guy that God's going to make sure that everyone finds out what's happened to him. God's going to get the angels to start playing trumpets and to blow the crime into everybody's eyes so that everybody can find out about the deep damnation. Look at that heavy plosive alliteration, the deep damnation, the kind of hellish evil of killing Duncan. So Macbeth is clearly thinking about the spiritual repercussions, even though at the start of the speech he said, I wouldn't worry about that if I wasn't going to get caught here. Yes, you would, mate. You're thinking about it. But what makes this speech so brilliant, and something that critics frequently focus on, is that despite the fact that this second half of the speech is really packed with these Christian, godlike images of angels and cherubim and pity and damnation, and there's the word judgment in the earlier part of the speech, despite this vocabulary strongly connected with spiritual judgment and being damned, at no point in the speech does Macbeth say to himself, hang on, I shouldn't do this because it's wrong. He never says to himself, I shouldn't do this because it's wrong. He says, I shouldn't do it because God will tell everybody and I'll get caught, which is not really morality, is it? It's more the thinking process of a criminal. Will I get caught? If I'm not going to get caught, I'll do it. But it's not the thinking or the morality of a good Christian. Is it right or is it wrong? And that's what critics focus on when they talk about this speech. They say Macbeth seems to realise that what he's doing is wrong, but he doesn't explicitly say to himself, hold on a minute, this is wrong. It just comes out in the imagery he uses. So there are these strongly Christian tones to the speech he's making. And in fact, this is what really contributes to him being a great and a famous tragic hero. Because he does have deeply buried within him this sense of morality that he grapples with and that comes out in these images from time to time. But he's not able to stop himself from committing the crime. And he's a tragic hero because, he's got this nobility of spirit deep inside there. But the tragedy is that he's not able to control it. So he goes from this position of power and some kind of moral worth, and he falls. And that's the arc of a tragic hero. So it's a really key speech and a really key scene for setting him up as a tragic hero. And it's important that we do feel some sympathy for him, and we recognise that he's grappling with these big ideas and that he really thinks it's wrong. Because if we don't see him doing that, then we're tempted to view him purely as an evil figure, as a tyrant later on. But it's a big speech, it's a big moment. It reminds us, or it puts in our mind, the fact that there is good within him. Some of the other arguments he brings up about why he shouldn't commit the crime, and he goes through really rather quickly, might be even more persuasive for other audiences than the Jacobean audience. One of the things he says in passing is that he's my kinsman, I'm related to him, which to me, as a modern audience member, is, of course, the biggest reason of all why you shouldn't commit the crime. I mean, of course, you shouldn't kill your family member, should you? So that's, for modern audiences, a persuasive argument. He brings up another argument which is important to Jacobean audiences, which is this idea of how you shouldn't kill your king. Yeah, I'm his subject, he's my king, that would be regicide. He brings that up. So the Jacobean audience would also be thinking, yes, that's another good reason not to do it. There's the Christian reason not to do it. There's also the social reason. There's even an argument which would appeal to the ancient Greeks. If they could come back and watch this play, they'd have been sitting there and nodding at the other argument he brings up, which is the idea that I'm the host. I've got to look after my guest. What's being referenced there is the ancient Greek concept of xenia, or guest friendship, which is pretty much the oldest moral code in the Western moral code book. When you're staying at someone's house, or they're staying at your house, there's this host-guest relationship. And the basic unwritten rule of hospitality is that the host and the guest should treat each other as they would wish to be treated were the situation reversed. And that goes back as far as the Greeks, who wrote about this concept, who built their civilization on this code along with a few other codes. And so that argument there takes us right back to the oldest reason of all as to why you should not kill anybody. Because if they're your guest, you should be looking after them. So there we go. We've got these three arguments that are not Christian arguments that go back as far as the Greeks, the xenia argument, the anti-regicide argument that appeals also to the Jacobeans, and the modern argument, I shouldn't do it because he's in my family. All of those arguments, he kind of brushes them aside because really what he's thinking about is this moral argument, is this Christian argument. And then, finally, he comes up with the reason he's planning to do it, which is his ambition. When he says,
I have no spur to prick the sides of my intent, but only vaulting ambition, which o'erleaps itself and falls on the other.
Now, this is a horse metaphor. We've actually talked about it when we were talking about Act 1, Scene 6. We talked in that video about how Duncan had used the same word spur, and Duncan had thought that Macbeth was spurred on by his great love. But Macbeth himself says that his spur, or the thing that he uses to kick the horse of his direction, of his drive, is not love but ambition. And what he recognises here in this horse metaphor is that ambition is something that vaults, something that jumps very high. But what he equally recognises is that when the ambition overleaps, it falls on the other side, which in the horse metaphor means, you jump high and you fall off when you hit the ground on the other side. So he's really recognising that this plan is probably not going to work. And in fact, that's another example of foreshadowing. Yeah, he does jump too high and he does fall off, metaphorically speaking, on the other side. But let's look at a couple of those words in a bit more detail. Overleaps is a word that we also talked about when we talked about Act 1, Scene 4, when he talked about the Prince of Cumberland and he said that's a step I've got to overleap. And we talked then about how that made him sound like an overreacher, someone who goes further than they should, who does something that goes beyond their position in society or goes beyond their capabilities, goes too far. We talked then about Icarus flying too close to the sun. So we talked about this literary character, the overreacher. And by Macbeth using that word, he's kind of recognising that he's an overreacher. He's going to go too far. And the word fall is also interesting, isn't it? Because yes, it could mean fall off your horse, but given the context, given everything else he's been talking about in this speech, where he's been talking incessantly about the fear of judgment, about angels, about God, well, fall is also a Christian word, isn't it? The fall of Adam and Eve, the fall of man, the fall from innocence to experience, from purity to corruption. So that word there again suggests that he's thinking in these imagistic terms about his possible spiritual fall. He's used the word damnation and now he uses the word fall. And that's the moment at which he gets cut off by his wife, when he's still trying to get it together that this is the wrong thing to do, when he's still coming out with these images that suggest he's got some awareness that it's wrong, when he seems to be saying that even his one reason for doing it is not a great reason because he's going to fall, his wife comes in and everything changes. And we'll talk about that in the next video.